Alright guys, so it's a big project. We've got like, let's see, 198 tracks it looks like. So I'm running this off my old laptop, so the project is going to crash every now and then. Just bear with. There we go again. Alright guys, so because I just opened up the project and I'm playing some samples off battery, so basically the first time the project loads and plays, sometimes battery is like mega loud for some reason, so you'll see when I play that again, it's gonna be all good. If it doesn't crash, so that's what you get when you've got a lot of tracks. But I'll just play the last drop and then we can get started with going through the project. Alright, cool. So there we have it. Yeah, so as I say guys, there's a bit of a delay. So as I'm saying this to you guys, I can see myself like from a minute ago on the screen, which is kind of weird, but we will get through it. Thank you all for joining the webinar. It's great to have you all here. So the first question which we've had is, do you always work with Logic because you've got FL too? Yeah, so I've got FL, I've got Ableton, I work mainly in Logic, but I've also worked in Cubase and Pro Tools, and when it comes to using a music software, you know, it's cliche, but it's really like what you're used to. So as long as you know how to use the software, you know how to do everything, you know how to you know how to set up the sidechain, you know how to use the automation, all that kind of stuff. I think it really doesn't matter which software you use. They're all kind of good in different ways. They've all got their own kind of benefits. FL has a really good MIDI processing kind of thing, which allows you to do really cool stuff like arpeggiators and stuff, which you have in Logic as well, but FL is more powerful in that way. But for me, I just like the kind of workflow in Logic. I like the way that kind of everything has got its own track, and it's quite easy to see what's going on, whereas in FL sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. I generally work in Logic, and I like the way that it looks as well. You know, that's a big thing for me because I spend a lot of time producing, and you know, I think like working in Cubase or something, it just looks a little bit more dull. Like, I think for me the most dull looking one is Ableton, and you know, it's about fun as well, you know, and if it looks kind of like all grey and there's not much colors and stuff, I find it's a bit less kind of captivating. So, you know, part of the music process is just making sure that you're enjoying it as much as you can, kind of. So, but you know, whatever works for you guys, whatever digital audio workstation floats your boat. So let's get started. First of all, I want to say thank you all for joining. We're still waiting for people to join, but I'm just going to start off by saying that I want this webinar to provide as much value for you guys as possible. I don't really believe that, you know, there's maybe some people out there who don't want to share everything because, you know, they think that people are going to steal their secrets, they're going to steal what makes them kind of original, and I don't really believe that. I think, you know, the kind of possibilities of music, the creative possibilities of music are endless, and music is going to keep evolving, and I want to be able to share my experience with you guys and my knowledge in order to help you guys kind of get to where you want to be as quickly as you can. And like I said in one of my videos, I wish that I'd had access to this when I was just starting off, because I had, like, this was 11 years ago. I was 13. I just opened up Logic, and I made a song in like 20 minutes, and you know, it was crap, but it was fun. But there wasn't much like resources out there in order to learn how to improve. You know, the YouTube, there wasn't too much stuff on YouTube. There's a lot more useful resources now, but you know, it's very different being able to actually interactively talk to someone on a webinar, face-to-face kind of thing, as it is to just watching a YouTube video where someone breaks down their track. So you guys, I would encourage you guys to you know, ask me questions, ask me whatever you want to know about the track. I will be breaking down everything which I mentioned, if you've seen the seminar kind of breakdown. But you know, feel free to ask me whatever you want, and I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I'm going to show you everything, and I'm not going to be, you know, holding anything back. So because I want you guys to learn, and if you guys, you know, come up with some good music, then I'm always open to collaborations. You probably know, if you've talked to me on Instagram, I try and respond to everyone. So you know, I'm here to help you guys along the way. And I'm also going to be doing one-on-ones as well after this project. So I'm just going to answer a couple of questions. So Mondala Kadeep 1 asks, have you used Cakewalk? No, I haven't actually used. That's one which I haven't used. And again, I don't think it really matters too much which DAW you use, as long as you know how to use it. So you know, there's great producers working with Cakewalk. There's great producers working with FL. There's amazing producers working with every DAW because they know how to use it. So you know, as long as your DAW doesn't limit you, as long as you don't feel like there's significant problems with it, I don't really see any reason to change. Apart from that, when you're collaborating with other artists, it's useful to know how to use like FL, for example, because a lot of producers use FL, and that's the reason why I kind of wanted to learn that a little bit. So right, just going through the questions here. So someone asked, can you show a song project with a higher energy, 128 BPM? So today I'm going to be showing you guys this remix, because that's what everyone signed up for. But I will be doing future webinars where I'm going to be showing you guys more stuff and different projects and that kind of stuff. But this is the recent remix which I made, and someone else asked, can you tell us how you usually start a project? So yeah, it depends, but often I'll come up with like a kind of drop idea, kind of like I'll just hear something in my head and I know kind of like what chords I want or what melody I want, so I just start crafting the drop like that. I'll normally start with the chords and the melody as opposed to like a beat, although I have like some kind of rough beat to write it all out to. But recently I've been doing a lot of stuff where, for example, like this remix, I just finished another remix actually yesterday. And if you guys want to hear that, I can, I've got it here. If you guys want to hear it at the end of the webinar or something, let me know in the comments. But basically, if I've got a vocal or something, I find it's very easy to produce to the vocal. And I think it's a great starting point. So if you guys are stuck for inspiration, you're not sure how to start your track, I would advise going on to Skio Music or Splice. You can check out like a remix contest, and you can download some acapellas for free. Skio Music has like some, I saw it has like some Chainsmoker acapellas and stuff, which is awesome. So definitely go check those out. If you're lacking inspiration, you can just grab an acapella and just start writing to it. So let's jump into this project. The first thing I want to talk about, and this is something that you guys are gonna, if there's one thing you take from this webinar, it's organization. Like, you guys really need to make sure that you're organized, because when you get to this kind of like stage where you are, you've got a project with like 200 tracks, you need to know roughly where everything is. And if you don't know where everything is, if you haven't color coded, if you haven't roughly organized your track vertically, then it's going to be very difficult to find the instruments and tracks that you need, and you're going to spend like half your time just scrolling around the track trying to find where your snare is or where your kick is. And organization is not just about color coding inside the project and like organizing it in the project itself, but it's also about organizing your samples. And the way I organize my samples is I've got three folders. I've got samples, I've got presets, and I've got kind of like packs, which is just packs of different genres which might have samples and presets in it. And for example, in the samples folder I have drums, and then I have kick, snare, you know, hi-hat, crashes, rides, that kind of stuff, and I'll have another folder for like effects, so impacts, rises, down sweeps, all that kind of stuff. And it's really important to have that organization, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to access those samples quickly. And I think it's really important, if you want to kind of keep that creative mindset going when you're producing, you want to be able to quickly like grab those samples. So you want to have like some kick samples ready, you want to have some snare samples ready, you know, you want to have some impacts ready that you know where they are and you can just grab them, drag them in. So that's the one thing. If you guys take away one thing from this webinar, it's make sure you're organized and make sure your samples are all, you know where they are, you know where to find them. And if you guys aren't on Splice, then make sure that you join Splice, because Splice is a game changer. Really, like, you can search for any kind of, you know, loop in any BPM, any samples, or, you know, anything you're looking for, you'll find it on Splice. So if you guys aren't on it, then let me know. But yeah, I mean, this session that we're doing now isn't just about this particular project. This is going to be something which is going to apply to everyone, no matter what kind of genre you're producing. If you're producing techno, if you're producing trap, if you're producing 128, you know, BPM, future house or normal house, this project and this webinar is hopefully going to be useful for you guys, no matter what kind of music you produce, because I'm going to be going into not just the specifics of this project, but also my general kind of mindset around producing and general tips that are going to help you, regardless of what kind of music you're making. Like what I was talking about with organization, it's very important to organize your samples and organize your projects regardless of what kind of music you make. So moving on from that, I'll just quickly like explain to you what's going on in the project. So how I organize my projects is I generally start from the bottom up. So I've got the sub here, I've got the basses here, 808s, kicks, I've got the snare, I've got the pads, guitar, pianos, lead, vocals, there's a vocoder there as well, and then there's some like snaps here, and then here we've got some more percussion stuff, which is more kind of like high frequency percussion stuff that kind of sits, to me it feels like it kind of sits on top of the vocal. And then there's more percussion. This is all like percussion stuff and fills, and we've got hi-hats over here, and up here we've got all the effects. So that's how I organize my projects. I'm not saying you guys, you know, should organize it this way, but it's definitely one way which you can do. And since I started organizing my projects this way, it made my life a lot easier. And also, like, if I'm, you know, going back into an old project, I know where to find everything because I know it's all going to be roughly in the same place. So however you organize your projects, just make sure that you're organizing it in the same way. So all right, so I'm gonna look at the questions we've got. So someone said, can you tell us how you usually start a project? So I think I've answered that. Normally I'll start off with the drop, if I've got a drop idea, or I'll just start off with some chords and just start kind of vibing like that, or I'll write to an acapella. And I think writing to an acapella, you know, even if you don't end up using that acapella, is going to be really useful, you know, to produce lots of different kinds of styles of tracks. Because if you pick a vocal at 85 BPM or pick a vocal at, you know, 128 BPM, obviously you're going to end up making very different styles of songs. So it's an easy way to kind of like broaden the genres that you're making. All right, so next question: do you produce with speakers or headphones normally? Well, right now I'm using headphones, because if I use speakers, we're going to get feedback. But in general, I use speakers because I find headphones are great, but it's very like closed, the sound. So what I use headphones for is generally more like the kind of smaller details of tracks. So kind of like if I'm trying to really hear the elements of a mix, I might use my headphones, but when I'm doing the production stage, I'll probably use speakers. And yeah, it's basically the headphones I use for the kind of finer details, and speakers I use for the bigger details. And generally, I like to focus on the bigger details of the project because that's what kind of matters most. And that's another point for you guys, which is whenever you're making your music, it's very important to bear in mind that the music is not just about what's on your screen. It's not just about what's on your computer. It's about what effect it has on the listener. It's about what's coming out of the speakers. Firstly, you know, if the music's good, I don't care if you're using loops. I don't care what samples you're using. I don't care if you haven't put a low cut on your snare or whatever. You know, if it sounds good, it sounds good. So, you know, the rules are made to be broken. And that's an important thing. And you know, when I was starting off, I had all these kind of like rules that I'd learned from YouTube videos and stuff, and it's not always right. And that's you know, that's where trusting your ears comes into play, and also referencing and comparing your track to professional tracks. It's very important. But just bear in mind that whenever you're making music, as long as it sounds good and as long as it kind of creates that emotional effect that you're after, you know, keep it. If you're happy with it, keep it. If it sounds good, keep it. If it's kind of like and as long as the mixing is roughly the same as your reference tracks, you can basically do whatever you want. So just bear that in mind. That's another key takeaway for you guys, and it's something which I say a lot. It's not about what's on your project. It's not about if you're making your own loops. It's about what your music does to the listener, what kind of emotional effect it has on the listener. And that's why people like, you know, Martin Garrix and the Chainsmokers and Alan Walker do so well, because their music, you know, hits people on an emotional level. And it's not necessarily the most like super complex music in the world, like it's mixed really, really well, but often like simplicity is something which is sometimes hard to achieve. Making something simple but effective, you know, is very important. So, best plugin for mixing. I would say that there's not one best plugin for mixing. I mean, I suppose if I had to pick one plugin, it's very difficult. I'd probably pick Reverb if I had to pick one plugin when I couldn't pick anything else. And the reason for that is if you pick good sounds, you don't necessarily need to do much EQing, you don't necessarily need to do much compression, because if you've got good sounds and your production is good, you know, I've seen people making amazing projects on FL Studio, and they're barely doing any EQing, barely doing any compression. They're just picking great samples, great sounds, and they're just throwing them in the project, and it sounds great. And that's the thing, sound selection is so important. But you know, there's one thing you can't do with sound selection, and that's adding reverb. So if I had to say one plugin which is kind of crucial for mixing, I would say Reverb, because Reverb gives your mixes that more authentic, that more professional, that more kind of natural sound. But it's very difficult to get reverb right, so you have to make sure that you know what you're doing. And often too much reverb is a lot worse than not enough reverb. So I'd say you always want to err on the side of kind of, you want to basically, when you're mixing reverb into your tracks, you want to boost the reverb to the level where you can just about hear it, and then just back off a little bit, depending on the style of your track, of course. If you're making some like epic future bass style stuff, you know, you'll want some like snare with a load of reverb on it. But you know, if you're making 128 BPM house music, generally you want your stuff to be really in your face, really energetic, really clean, really aggressive, and really powerful. And when you use reverb, sometimes that can really get in the way. So with that being said, I'm going to show you guys how I used reverb in this track, especially in the intro, in just a sec. Just going to answer the rest of the questions here. So someone said show us that project. I think that's for my latest remix. I will show you guys, that's probably going to be the next webinar. That's probably going to be in the next webinar, but I can give you guys a little sneak peek now. Just play it from here. System overload. Can't handle it. That's all you're getting, guys. But I will be breaking down that remix in a future webinar, probably the next one. So getting back to this project, questions we've got. I didn't hear from Splice before. Yeah, guys, Jeff, definitely go check out Splice. If you don't know what Splice is, it is a game changer. Definitely make sure that you guys are on Splice. You need to be on Splice. I can't kind of emphasize that enough. Someone else said, how do you process, I guess they mean process your vocals. I will be going into that at the end of this webinar if we've got time. So yeah, just hang on tight for that, hang on tight for the end, and I will go through with you how I process vocals. But just a real quick answer to that question, you want to be boosting the highs. If you're making EDM, you want to boost the highs quite a lot, you want to cut the lows quite a lot. You want to add at least one reverb, maybe two reverbs. Generally you want to sidechain the reverb to the vocal, so that when the vocals when you can hear the vocal, you don't hear too much reverb, and when the vocal stops, the reverb comes in, and you can use that technique, sidechaining the reverb, to pretty much anything when you want that effect. So, you know, for example, if you're making a future bass drop, that's what I did in my recent remix. You can sidechain the reverb to the pad, and then when the pad stops, the reverb comes up to kind of fill in the gap. When the pad's playing, the reverb doesn't get in the way. So that's a really important thing about processing vocals. Apart from that, of course, obviously you want to compress them, you want to put a de-esser on them, and using a plugin like Cla Vocals is a game changer. Like Cla Vocals, just putting the plugin on the vocal massively changes the sound, and there's so many big producers out there who use Cla Vocals and swear by it. And it's not just for vocals, I also used it on vocal chops, and the other Cla plugins are great for other things too. So that's a quick answer for the vocal processing, but if you guys want, I can go into that in more detail later, so just let me know. Someone else said, how do I get more mids in a progressive house lead? So if you want to get more mids in your lead, then the basic answer would be EQ. You know, obviously you just boost the mids in the lead, or you could double the lead down an octave to get a little bit more lows in the lead. Another plugin which you guys should also check out is OTT by Xfer. I don't know if you guys know about it. Probably most of you do, but it's a free plugin, and it's great. It's really powerful plugin. It's going to really change your sound. It's like an upwards downwards compressor. So you know, if you're looking for something to kind of add that extra sparkle to your sounds, definitely go check out OTT. And another answer to getting more mids in your lead would be to double the lead down the octave. That's what I just said. No, sorry, it would be to layer the lead. So you want to add another layer to the lead. Layering is a very important part of music production, and it's something which normally takes like a few kind of years of experience in the music production thing to kind of really get the hang of. But the basic essence behind layering is just put two sounds together. Don't worry too much about the EQing or anything like that. If you pick the right sounds, it's gonna sound cool. And basically you just don't want those two sounds to sound too similar. So with that being said, we will be going into the drum layering in this project. There's a lot to get through, so I'm going to jump into the project now. With regards to the vocals, these ones are the official vocals from Han. I'm just going to say hi to everyone who's joined so far. We're still waiting for a bunch of people to join. But I'm going to start playing the project. I'm going to let you guys listen to the intro, and then I'll break it down for you. Alright, cool. So yeah, as I say, this is like an older project, and I'm running it off the laptop which I made it on. I've since upgraded my laptop, so things are going to run a lot smoother from now on in the next webinars. But it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this demonstration. I can still explain to you guys exactly what's going on. So we start off with this pad sound, and kind of going into what I was talking about earlier about reverb. If this pad didn't have the reverb on it, it would sound like this. So as you guys can hear, it sounds way less kind of vibey. It just doesn't sound anywhere near as professional. So one technique which you guys can use, and again, it doesn't matter what genre of music you're producing, is just apply loads of reverb to a sound and see how it sounds, and it can really change it and make it sound way more kind of cool and atmospheric. So what I'm doing here is literally the reverb is on 100%, completely wet. This is a very, very basic sound from Serum, as you just heard. And this reverb plugin, Valhalla Room, is just the best reverb plugin. Personally, I think it's the best reverb plugin. I wish it had a low cut, but apart from that, you know, it is just so good. It's CPU friendly. It looks great. It's easy to understand. It's just fun to use, and it's not complicated. You know, there's a lot of reverb plugins out there which are like super complicated, all these different things, and to be honest, I barely use any of those. Valhalla Room has everything which I think most people are going to need, and I really recommend it. You know, whether it's for putting reverb on drums, whether it's for putting reverb on synths, you know, anything, vocals, Valhalla is a really good plugin to use. So I put the mix on 100%. It's a 2-second reverb. A high cut is just on the standard. These are actually just the standard settings. And yeah, again, this is with, and this is without. So when people tell you to not use too much reverb, they're saying that because it's going to muddy up the mix. But sometimes when you use reverb for a creative effect, it's going to, you know, completely change the vibe of your track. You know, even if you're making like techno, for example, you know, if you put loads of reverb on some kind of like dark lead sound or on some kind of pad or something, it could really change it. Or if you're doing, you know, massive big room EDM and you want to make some big kind of like huge sounding leads, what you can do is put some reverb on them and then put sausage fastener after that, and you can compress the reverb and the lead sound together, kind of squish them together, and that's a really useful technique for you guys. So when people say not to use too much reverb, I would agree with that. And the way to counteract that is make sure that your reverb times generally are around 1 to 2 seconds, and your generally you want to be low cutting the reverb. So here I've just put quite a how should I say this, it's filtering out a lot. there's a low cut filtering out. It's at 130 hertz, but because it's a 6 decibel curve, it's really a little bit higher than that. And there's a cutting out the highs here as well. So this is without that. And this is with. So it really puts it way in the background and leaves a lot of space for the vocals. So, you know, that's important, guys. If you've got, you know, vocals on a track, your vocals need to be in the middle. They need to be really prominent, and they need to be crisp, and they need to be having all the highs. So your other instruments, you want to really make sure that you carve out a space for the vocals, and that's basically what I've done here. It's very like sparse percussion. There's not too much going on in the intro, and then we're going to build on that in a bit. So we've got that pad, and then we've got this 808, and for the 808 I'm using Kick 2, which is a really great plugin. Really recommend it. It's not just for kicks, it's also for 808s, obviously, and you can use it to make your own kicks, you can use it to make your own 808s, and the best thing about it is that you can put a you can use this portamento option here, and you can kind of slide 808 notes, which is a really useful trick when you're making like future bass or any kind of genre, really. If you're doing the slide thing, we turn on the slide here, turn up the slide time, and then you want to draw in like a little thing, and you should hear it kind of come down. And yeah, you just heard it kind of like went up there. So that's basically what the slide thing does, and you can basically set it so that you can slide around in your drop, and it just adds like an extra element of depth to your tracks, and it just kind of adds that professional touch. If you listen carefully, you'll probably hear, like for example in No Rules by Dua Lipa, the production of that song is great, and you'll hear the bass kind of sliding around. So that's basically how they did that, using portamento on the bass is really useful. And you can also use portamento to create risers. You can use it to create lead sounds that kind of slide around and stuff. It's a really useful technique. Someone asked, how do you put sidechain on reverb? So I could show you that real quick as well. Let's say with this pad here, if you go to sends, we're going to send it to a bus, let's say bus 50. We're going to put a reverb on the bus. We're going to make sure you want to, if you're putting sidechain on your reverb, you want to send the if you want to send whatever you want to put the reverb on, send it to a bus. Make sure that the reverb's on 100% wet, and then you want to add a compressor. So I like to use the Waves C1, and then you just set the sidechain to whatever instrument you're using. So there is a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot of different instruments, but if I set it to this now, I'm going to turn off the reverb on the original thing, boost the ratio a little bit. Now you should be able to hear you can see the reverb is basically being sidechained now to the original pad sound. So that's a really useful technique for vocals and for a lot of things. And what you can also do is if you're making like big room EDM, you can put reverb on your lead and then put like a 4 on the floor sidechain on the reverb to kind of get that pumping reverb sound. It's kind of like a more advanced production technique. And also just remember to EQ your reverb, very important, whatever genre of music you're making. If you don't EQ your reverb, things are going to get muddy really quickly. So I'm going to take that off for now. Hopefully that answers your question. Moving on, if you guys have any more questions, please do let me know, and I will answer you guys as soon as possible. So we've got an 808 in the verse, and then we've got an 808 here, which is a different 808 with a bit less attack on it, because here I'm introducing the kick. So if you want to have a kick and an 808, you want to make sure you're using an 808 with not much punch, so that the kick hits and then the 808 comes through kind of after that. So that sounds like this. All right, so that's the next part of the intro. We've got a little kick there, and for my drums I use Battery. I really recommend Battery. It's a great plugin. Just make sure you store all your Battery kits in the same place, preferably on your laptop hard drive, because if you put them on a different hard drive, you might get issues, which is what I had in this project. And I had to go through the project for this webinar and like manually put all the samples back in. So you really don't want to do that. If you know that, so that's why there's a couple of sounds here which might be missing. They're very small sounds. Just make sure that if you do use Battery, you put your kits in one place, preferably on your laptop hard drive, so you don't have them on an external hard drive. And if you're using Battery, the advantage to this is, and again, this can be applied to anything, working with drums in MIDI is so much more flexible and versatile in some ways than working with audio. And that's because, you know, with Battery, for example, if I've got like a complex hi-hat rhythm, I can quickly swap out the sample that I'm using for a different one, or I can quickly layer it with another sound. But if I've made that hi-hat pattern out of audio, it's going to be a real pain to try and kind of like copy the whole pattern out again. So Battery is something which I use, and it's really great. You can do a lot with it. You can you can tune the samples, you can pan the samples, you can add EQs, compression, transient design, saturation, and a really cool thing, which I'll be demonstrating later, is in the setup menu you've got this articulation, and if I turn that on, it does that. And so using that on snares, this one's a great one to use on snares, buzz. And when you use that on a snare, you get that kind of machine gun snare effect. So that's really, really useful. One of the reasons why I love battery, and the tuning thing is a really great kind of, it really helps to speed up your workflow. Apart from that, how I made the chords. So I don't know if you guys want me to go more into depth on the kind of harmonic side of things, the melodies, the chords, that kind of stuff. Let me know. But just real quick, I'm going to break it down for you guys, and hopefully this will clear up your if you have issues with music theory or anything like that, this should help. So basically, in a scale, you've got basically 7 notes in a major scale. So let's say C major, you've got C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And all of your melodies and all of your chords, in most cases, are going to be comprised of just those notes. So to make a chord, you just take the first note, skip a note, then you've got the third note, skip a note, you've got the 5th note. So for example, you've got C, E, G, or D, F, A, and so on. And there's really only 6 chords which you can choose from. So for example, in C, you can choose from C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, or you could use B diminished, B half diminished, whatever it is. But generally people don't use that. So you've basically got 6 chords to choose from, and you just want to make sure that whatever chord you have, you want to make sure that you have the root note of the chord in the bass. So as long as you've got that, your chords are going to sound all right. So whenever people are struggling with chords, I just wish they had like this kind of basic knowledge which would help them, and that's why I'm kind of just trying to break it down for you guys real quick. And what I've done here is something a little bit more advanced. I mean, it's not very complicated, but we've basically got the chord here, which is the basic chord. So C sharp, we're in C sharp major here. So if I bring this down to C, just to make it easier to kind of understand, we've got a C, we've got an E, we've got a G, and a C again. So that's just the C chord, and then we've got an E on the top. And putting the third on the top of a chord is something that's very useful for kind of making your chords sound really professional. And it's something that the chain smokers do, and it just makes the chord sound a lot nicer, because if we take this away, it sounds like this. But when we put the F on top, okay, not a very good example in this particular case because it's so filtered you can't really hear it. But when you put the third on top of a chord, it's going to make the chord sound more interesting, more pleasing. And so we've got a C major chord here, then we're going to F sharp major, and then we've got A sharp minor, and then I believe, let's see, so you've got a C sharp chord, and the bass line is C sharp, F sharp, A sharp, and G sharp. So those are basically the chords. You've got C sharp major, F sharp major, A sharp minor, and then we've got a G. And basically what I'm doing here with the chords is I'm using inversions, which makes it a little bit more interesting. because basically if you're playing a piano and you're playing your chords like this, and then the next chord you're jumping and you're playing that, it's going to sound very static. So when you use inversions, basically what you're doing is you're just you're using all the same notes in the chord, but you're switching the order of those notes, so that if you were playing on a piano, you would only move your fingers a little bit. And that's a very useful technique to kind of create more interesting chords, because you're basically selecting the notes and then switching the octave in the note. So I've also added some extra notes here, and I've also done some kind of like inversion. So I've changed some of the in this case I've actually changed some of the bass notes, which makes it more interesting. So once you've got your basic outlines for your chords, what you can do is just try changing the root note on the bass, and that will give you a more interesting kind of like chordal feeling. That's how you start to create those really unique sounding chords. So if you guys want me to go into more detail on that, I can do, but for now we're going to push on. I'm just going to answer the questions as well that we've got. So which speakers do you use for productions? I've got Focal SM9s. They're pretty expensive speakers, but I absolutely love them. I mean, I use them every day. You know, I'm listening to them for like 9 hours a day, and they've got an inbuilt subwoofer, which makes life a lot easier for mixing kind of bass frequencies and stuff. And I've also got the Focal Utopia headphones, which are great for hearing the really high-end stuff. So I use the speakers for mixing the really mixing the kick and the 808, for example, and then I use the Utopias for mixing the really high kind of detailed stuff, and for hearing, for example, when I'm pushing my track with a limiter, hearing how hard I've pushed it. And someone also said, how do you usually add stereo imaging for the elements in your songs? Sorry guys, all this talking is making my voice go a little bit hoarse. So stereo imaging is something which I will get onto in a little bit. For now, suffice it to say that I use the Ozone Imager on a lot of things, and it's really, really useful because you can break down the different frequency bands. And generally in music, what you want to do is you want to make sure the lower frequencies are in mono and the kind of higher frequencies are in stereo. So using the Ozone Imager, which I used on the master channel, you can see here all the frequencies below 140 I've brought down to completely mono, and then the frequencies between 140 and 2K I've boosted just a tiny bit, and then the frequencies between 2K and 10K a bit more, and the very high frequencies boosted quite a lot in the stereo space. So that's generally something you want to be doing in your mixes. For example, your basses, you want to have them more in mono. Your pads, you might want to have them more out to the side. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Another question someone says, do you think the sub pack is worth it for mixing? I think if you have to mix on headphones, then yes. If you have speakers, probably not. There's some absolutely brilliant producers I know who mix on very small speakers and they get great mixes. So, you know, the equipment you use, guys, doesn't matter as much as your skills. I know people who are producing amazing songs on just headphones, and to be honest, I think the bass response on a lot of headphones is really quite good. These ones which I've got on at the moment are the Sennheiser's HD650s, and if you need a recommendation for headphones, the Sennheisers are really top notch, and really not too expensive either. So also the Audio Technicas are pretty good. But I'd say for mixing, these open back headphones are going to be your best bet. So I'm going to try and go through this real quick with you guys, because we're kind of running out of time. So this is the verse, and what I've done in the verse is we've got snares here, we've got snaps, we've got hi-hats, Let me know if you guys want me to solo any of these or show you what I'm doing with them. But an example of layering is I've got this hi-hat here, and I've layered it with this tropical kind of more jingly kind of hi-hat. And what I've actually done with that hi-hat is, this is something which is really cool about Battery. So it looks like I've actually panned some of these sounds. As you can see, that one's panned off to the right, that one's panned off even more to the right, that one's in the middle, that one's at the left. So that's basically how I've panned it. I've actually duplicated the sound, and then I've panned each individual sound, some to the right, some to the left. So that's a really useful technique for you guys if you want to get that kind of like really spread out hi-hat sound. You can pan each individual hit, duplicate the hits, then pan them out, change the volumes of them slightly, and you're going to get a really nice kind of wide sound. And again, you can use that for any kind of genre of music, with your percussions, just to spread them out. So Trigger says, I've started using Ozone Imager, but I'm getting a lot of phasing issues. You're gonna get phasing issues if you overdo it. If everything is too wide, that's when you're basically gonna get issues. Generally, when you've got stuff in mono, at least I don't get any problems. And phasing for me has never really been something that I've paid too much attention to. Like, again, if the track sounds good, you know, generally you don't have to worry about it too much. It's something which you definitely have to look at when you're in the mixing stage, but you know, I think it's often something maybe caused more by using too many sounds which are very similar. For example, using like 2 respaces. I don't know why you do that, you know, unless they're very different sounds. But if they're like kind of similar sounds, they could kind of cancel each other out, and you could get some issues. But I definitely recommend the Ozone Imager plugin for creating some nice stereo width. And Ozone also has a something called a goniometer, where you can see the kind of stereo information on your track. So definitely check out the iZotope Ozone stuff. I mean, it's crucial. Like, if you produce music, you need the iZotope stuff. Pretty much. I mean, there are other plugins which will do it, but the iZotope stuff is so easy to use, and they really produce some great stuff. So definitely recommend that. So moving on to the build up here. Another quick point is that I've got these little kind of like fill things here, which are just loops. Most of the stuff I've actually created the percussion myself, but here I'm just using these little chopped up loops, and it really adds something to the, you know, to the phrases. So using Splice for that, go check out samples by Ekali, E-K-A-L-I. He makes some amazing stuff for like trap and future bass. Really recommend it. But in general, Splices, you know, you'll find everything you need on there. And when it comes to using loops, again, like I said earlier, there's a big discussion about this, but all I would say is, if it sounds good, use it. Like, I really don't care if you use like 100 loops in your track, or if you use one. Almost all good producers use loops to some extent. If it sounds good, you know, go for it. I wouldn't use one loop for, say, all my drums, but you know, I would use loops for like little percussion elements and that kind of stuff. So moving on to the build up here. All right, so what have we got here? We've got a respace. Guys, if you're not using respaces, I find myself using respaces for so many things. Shout out, Hello Nurse, by the way. Thanks for joining. Shout out everyone who's joined so far. Really appreciate you guys turning up. And again, I really want to make sure you guys are getting the most out of this webinar. So let me know if you're finding it useful, or if you want me to kind of move on to something else. Like, let me know exactly what you guys want to hear, so I can make sure that I'm giving you the most value as possible, because you know, I want to make sure there's something in this webinar for everyone of all different levels of experience. So you know, whether you're a beginner or whether you've been producing for, you know, 11 years like I have, I want to make sure there's stuff in here that you'll be able to take away and learn from. So using respace, obviously, like, super useful. And a more advanced trick which you guys might not know about is something which I use all the time, and it's a volume shaper. And you guys might know about volume shaper for just creating 4 on the floor sidechain. But what I've been using it for recently, and I use it on, especially with future bass, it is so crucial, and that is to sidechain to something which isn't just a 4 on the floor kick. So you know, if you've got a kind of like hip hop beat or something, the kick's gonna be like dum 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 dum. And basically, when you put the volume shaper, when you put it on beat one shot mode, and then you can basically route your sound to volume shaper, and you can input the MIDI here. So that's what I've done here. I've inputted the kick pattern, and basically every time this kick hits, that's going to trigger the volume shaper. So what that does is every time the kick hits, the sound ducks. So basically it's sidechain compression, except you've got a lot more control over the compression. You can really change the shape of the sidechain compression, and I find that using something like just a standard compressor to sidechain, say, bass frequencies is something that can not always have the results which you want. It might not be fast enough. It might create kind of weird distortions. So using this is like a really clean way to just get that nice sidechain effect and create some nice room for your kick. And also what you can do is you can split up the bands here. So you can see in the low band I've actually carved out a bit more space for the kick, and in the mid band it's just a very small space. So you can basically split it up into different sections. This mid band is actually everything above 207 Hertz, and the low band is everything below 207 Hertz. So the reason for splitting it up is that you really don't want, say, the low frequencies of your kick to clash with your sub, whereas the high frequencies, you know, you don't need to worry about too much, because you want to feel that punch from the kick. So guys, I really recommend checking out Volume Shaper by Cable Guys. It's about, I think it's about maybe 40 bucks or something like that. You know, it's really not very much, and I use it all the time. If you're just doing like 4 on the floor kicks, then you can just use Kickstart, and I don't know if you guys know about Kickstart. Also very useful plugin, and I think I might be using it on the plugs here. Let's see. No, I'm not, but I'll demonstrate that to you guys. So if we get the respace here, alright, it's already being sidechained to the to the volume shaper. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Kickstart on it. Let's see, where is it? I haven't used it in a while, actually. Nicky Romero, Kickstart. So basically Kickstart is a more dumbed down version of volume shaper, so you can't actually change the shape of the sidechain yourself. So in that sense it's not as useful, but I'll show you what it does. It just basically adds a nice side chaining, pumping sound to your track, and it's very, very simple. All you do is you just put it on, and that's it. You know, done. So it's great for doing like 128 kind of stuff. But yeah, I definitely recommend you guys check out Volume Shaper by Cable Guys for any kind of side chaining things. You know, side chaining is so important. If you're making future bass, you need to like side chain the pad to the snare, you need to side chain the pad to the kick, you need to side chain the 808 to the kick, you need to side chain the maybe the sub to the kick, the bass. And using Cable Guys is really going to help you to get that really accurate kind of side chaining going on. So if you guys aren't using respacers already, I'm using Serum. Serum is a plugin that I use all the time. Personally, I think Serum is probably the best synth. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I wish, but I do think Serum is, for me, it's the best synth. It's the most versatile synth. It looks amazing. You can actually see all the LFO changes and stuff in real time. You can use it for like future bass pads. You can use it for like strong leads, respacers. So if you're not using Serum, I would really invest in that. And you can actually get Serum on a rent to own on Splice. So you pay like $10 monthly, and then after 18 months, you know, you've paid off the whole plugin instead of having to pay it all in one go, and you get to use it the whole time. So it's a really great deal. Definitely check that out. So someone says Kickstart is sick. Yeah, Kickstart is really great. I used it a lot a few years ago, but now I've moved on to Volume Shaper because I really have that control, and I can really, you know, control the volume at the points. Basically all Kickstart is it's a volume automation, so you can just change the volume curve. But Kickstart is definitely is a great plugin to use, especially if you're doing that 128 stuff. Just slap it on. They're made by the same people, so it's basically the same plugin. Volume Shape is just a bit more advanced. That's right, yeah. So someone says you get a lot of system overloads. Yeah, I mean, this is the for those of you who've joined late, this is the project. So we've got a lot of tracks. We've got 200 tracks. A lot of the tracks have a lot of plugins on them. There's a lot of bussing going on. So that's why I had to get a new laptop, because this one just couldn't handle it anymore. So guys, if you've got a good laptop, like an amazing laptop, then you don't have to care about the CPU. If you don't have an amazing laptop, you're going to have to be careful with your CPU. You're going to have to use buses, you're going to have to use reverb buses, all that kind of stuff. But I would say that when you get like a new computer with a lot of processing power and you're not getting those system overloads, it really frees you to be able to do whatever you want. And like it's really, like, if you can afford it, I would say go for it if you're having issues, because it means you can put like individual reverbs and individual tracks, and it just speeds up your workflow so much because you don't have to worry about bussing everything into something, compressing all of that stuff. I mean, I still do that for creative purposes, but not for the CPU purposes anymore. So that's just a quick rant about CPU. If you guys do have CPU issues, you're going to want to make sure you understand how to bus stuff and how to apply effects to multiple things. But the ideal situation is being able to affect each thing individually if you want to have different kind of sounds on each, and different levels of reverb and stuff. So we've got these nice kind of tropical plucks. I'm using Serum for those. And that kind of rhythm, dun, 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 you know, is kind of like classic tropical house rhythm that I've kind of edited a little bit and brought into this. I use it a lot, and I use these tropical plucks a lot as well. And that's why it's so important, guys, to save your presets, save your samples, so you can start to create your own like sound and your own like vibe. And you know, that's why all these professional producers have their own sound. They've got their own kind of like style, and it's because they've collected all these samples and presets, and they've created that. So whenever you make a preset that you like, whenever you hear a preset that you like, save it in a folder and make sure you know where it is, because it's so easy to get unorganized and lose your stuff. You know, if you, I don't know, some of you guys might want to, you know, turn this into a full-time career. If it's your full-time career, you need to be able to do this stuff quickly, because people are going to want you to make remixes within a week. You know, people are going to sometimes want you to produce a track in like 3 days. If you have your stuff scattered all over the place, you're not going to be able to, you're just going to be, it's going to be a mess. So you need to know where your stuff is. The best producers I know, they know where all their samples are, and they know where to find them. So looking into the processing on this plug, we've got a little bit of we've got a little bit of low cut on the EQ. We've got OTT, which I mentioned earlier. OTT really changes the sound. If we take that off, it really adds like a lot of highs. I'm just going to emphasize it for you guys. And by the way, OTT is a free plugin, so you have no excuse to not have OTT, because it's such a great plugin. This is it on 100%. It's going to really boost the highs. It's going to sound really crisp, really like distorted, but it shows you what it does. So using OTT, guys, you don't have any excuse to not use it. Someone says a week, bro, do it in 17 hours. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're making a project with like 50 tracks or something like that, you could potentially do it in 17 hours. If you've got a track with like 200 tracks, they've all got automations, they've all got all that kind of stuff, you know, it's like almost physically impossible to get that done in short amounts of times. And you know, that's why I'm saying to you guys, if you have everything streamlined as much as possible, you're going to speed up your production process a lot. And yeah, that's basically it. Just make sure you know where your samples are. So moving on, this pad is now being sent to a bus. The bus has some EQing going on, boosting some of the kind of like high mids and cutting some of the highs to allow room for the vocal. And we've also got OTT on the bus, which is for all the pads. So, you know, generally, guys, you want to send all your pads to a bus with a bit of processing on it. You want to send all your drums to a bus with processing like compression on it, EQ, that kind of stuff. It's really useful to have one master drum bus to be able to just solo your drums, and so you can hear and see if there's anything which doesn't sound, you know, 100% clean or something. You can just solo it and listen to it like that. So we've got the Ozone Imager on this, which is what I was talking about before. All the lows are in mono, and also it looks like I've actually put this range from 223 to 3K a little bit more in mono, so I guess it was just a little bit too wide. That's when you're going to get like phasing issues and stuff. So that's why I use the Ozone 8. You want to reference your favorite tracks, and if there's another thing which you guys take from this session, is make sure you reference your tracks, because referencing is like the most essential thing for mixing. You can use all the YouTube tutorials you want, but if you're not referencing, you don't know how your track compares to other tracks. And then when you listen to another track on like your iTunes or something, you're like, damn, that sounds so good. And you know, if so referencing is essential. Basically, I'm going to leave it there. If you're not referencing, you're probably not giving your tracks the full potential. And the plugin which I use for referencing is a really, really useful plugin. And it's called Adapter Metric AB. And I'll just quickly demonstrate it for you guys. So I'm going to turn it on. Firstly, you put it on your master, and I can now AB. If I go to my drop, I can AB it against the these reference tracks here. So I'm going to match the volume. Just click the match button, play my track. Right, and then I can now switch to B, and I can hear my reference track. Alright, so that's just a real quick demonstration of metric adapter AB. Whatever genre of music you're making, if you're making big room, trance, hardstyle, I don't care. You want to use adapter metric AB to just reference them. You can switch between different reference tracks. There's a whole bunch of useful functions in there, so definitely go check that out. I really, really recommend it. So going on to the build up here. Oh man, it's really struggling. See if I can quit splice. See if we can clear up some space. All right. So alright, I'll just explain it to you guys. It looks like that's going to be the easiest way. I think running this streaming software is also taking quite a lot of CPU power on my laptop. So we've got the pads from the drop here with an automation sweep here, and for that I'm using FabFilter Pro Q just to automate the volume with a high cut. Like, it's just a very basic technique for your build up. Take your pad from your drop, or take some kind of sound from your drop. You know, if it's like big room or whatever, you might take your lead, put it in the build up, and just filter the highs in towards the as you get towards the drop, and you can also cut out the lows, which I'm doing here as well. Where is that? Let's see. Looks like I'm using the Endless Smile. If you guys don't know what the Endless Smile is, it's a great plugin for build-ups. I use it all the time, and not just for build-ups. I use it for a lot of things. So this is what the Endless Smile does. You can kind of hear it adding reverb towards the end of the track. Want to make sure we can hear the pads. So you can hear it's kind of like adding reverb, and it's adding its own kind of low cut. It looks like this. You can use this plugin for anything. I love it. I love the graphic. Like, just look at that guy. He looks so happy. It's a great plugin. It's by Data Life, who made Sausage Fattener. So I really recommend you guys go check that out. It's great for build-ups. It's great for kind of adding atmospheric touches to your music. Just looking at the comments now. Yeah, Martin Garrix works on a track for 150 hours and is not yet finished. That's what I call perfection. And yeah, I would agree. Like, I would say, you know, if you're making a really, really good track, it can take a lot of time. You don't want to rush it. And guys, it's not a competition. You know, it's not about how fast you finish your track. It's just that sometimes you have to finish a track quickly. And you also don't want to be, you know, delaying and just spending ages working on the tiny details for months and months and months, because then it just gets annoying, you know. Guys, a quick tip for you is, if you want to learn quickly, finish a lot of tracks and just keep making tracks and keep learning from the tracks. Don't get lost in details. You know, if you're Martin Garrix, go for it. He knows what he's doing by now. But, you know, when you're starting off, you know, even when you've been doing it for a lot of years, you want to be trying to still focus on quantity, because the more quantity of songs you make, as long as you're improving after each one, you're gonna learn a lot more than if you spend ages focusing on like the tiny details. So that's something I would say, write that down. Quantity over quality, and people would disagree with me here, but that's something that I strongly believe in personally. And yeah, for the guys who are asking for the plugin name, it is Endless Smile. That's right. So that's what we've got on the build up. We've got the pads filtering in. Again, I'm using volume shaper on the pads to sidechain them to the kick, and we've got like a kind of build up snare here. Looking at the MIDI, it's just a kind of basic build up pattern. And what I've also done is I've got this kind of build up kind of like percussion loop thing, which I've created, and on the bus I've put another filter which is filtering up there, and I'll show you that real quick if it lets me play it. So yeah, you can hear that a little bit there. It's basically like kind of like a bongo pattern, but you know, that's inspired by Don't Let Me Down by the Chainsmokers. You can use anything you want, but just having some kind of like little percussion in the build up, there's like some kind of percussion loop that you're filtering in, maybe a bit of Endless Smile, is going to really add something to your build up. And I've also got a sausage fattener on this, and generally what I do with sausage fattener is you want to basically, it's basically like a limiter, so it turns your audio into a sausage, hence why it's called sausage fattener. If you guys don't have this, definitely go check it out. It's probably not considered correct to do it this way, but it's how I do it and it works. I literally turn the fatness up to 100%, turn the gain down all the way, and I normally don't touch the color option. But yeah, go check out sausage fattener. It's a great way to fatten up your tracks basically. Then I've got a few risers here as well. I created this one here. You guys can listen to it. So that's also got Endless Smile on it. Very basic riser, and literally the way it's created is by using the speed up function in Logic. So you just record in like a synth note, and again, you can do this with any kind of genre of music. Record in some kind of sound, a long held sustained note, and then put it into audio and just speed it up. Super quick to do, and you've got a riser. Not the most interesting riser, but it works in the context of the track. And then I've got another riser here, which I've bounced out, which uses tremolo. And tremolo is a really cool way to get this kind of like wide stereo, a kind of wobble effect as you come up to the drop. So I'll play that for you now. And you can see I've got some volume automation there as well, just to make sure it doesn't get too loud. So using tremolo on your tracks is something which you can do to create some kind of like excitement, especially on white noise. Agreed with Music Gentleman 21, quality will come over time. That's right. The more you produce, guys, you will start to understand what works and what doesn't. But if you work on one track for a long time, you know, especially if you're just starting off, I've been there, and it's not pretty, you know. You end up just doing the same stuff over and over again, making tiny changes and not really getting anywhere with the track. You want to focus on the big picture. You know, that's the most important thing, and that's why when you release a lot of tracks, you start to understand the big picture of the music. And it's true, guys, patience. It's all about patience. You know, when I started off, my tracks sounded like shit, and now they sound a bit less like shit. You know, you just got to keep working on it, and you'll get there eventually. So this is the drop. Alright, so what have we got going on here? Well, firstly, we've got the kick. the kicks, I should say, there's quite a few, well, there's 3 kicks layered together. This one is probably the most easy to make, because I've literally sampled it straight out of a Rehab extended track, and it sounds like this. Sounds pretty badass. And guys, if you find tracks you like, get an extended mix of the track, and often you'll be able to just literally cut the kicks straight out of the track. You might be able to cut the clap out as well. Literally just use the extended mix and steal their samples. Like, no one's gonna sue you, no one's gonna know. As long as you put your own spin on it, you know, you'll be absolutely fine. So that's what I've done here. That's a Rehab kick, and I literally just took it straight out of the track. Another thing I took out of the track was this sample, which is actually from the build up to the track, just before the drop, and it's got this really nice kind of reverse sound. So I'll play it without the effects. So I just tuned it into the key of the song, and I put on a little bit of Echo Boy to make it a little bit more smooth. And let's see what the other plugin is. Oh, right, okay, so I've EQ'd the bits which I liked, and took out the bits which I didn't like, basically. There was a lot of stuff going on in the mids that I didn't really like, so I scooped those out and took out some of the highs as well to make it blend in a little bit better. And you can hear that in the context of the track. It sounds really nice. And guys, it's really struggling here. We're going to try one more time. Yeah, cool. So you could hear it there. Another thing which I've got going on there is the tom fills. So I'll show you those real quick. Fill 1. So there's quite a lot going on here. I think you guys can learn a lot from this. So we've got Devil Lock, which I really recommend. It's a distortion plugin, adding a bit of crunch and crushing the toms a little bit. That's by Sound Toys. Go check that out. Really nice for distortion. Other ones you might want to check out are Saturn by Fab Filter. It's really nice. Sound Toys does some really good ones though, and Camel Crusher is also free. Camel Crusher is a great plugin, so go check that out as well. If you guys don't know about Irl Reverb, it's a great reverb that you can use for creating a very short room reverb. So when you don't want a big epic reverb, you can use IRL to add a bit more depth to your sound without kind of letting it get washed out. So I use IRL a lot on like drum sounds, things, short snappy sounds where you want to retain the snap. You can use IRL. You can experiment with using it on kicks. If you're making like future bass style music, you can experiment with using it on snares. For example, in the Chainsmokers Closer, on that lead sound, you know, you can tell they're using some kind of IRL reverb. And someone says, I kind of want to buy you a new processor now. It's okay, I've got a new laptop. Actually, it's right here. It's the 2019 MacBook Pro, and it's a beast, and I love it, and it's great. And the next session is going to be on that, and it's going to be flawless. So unfortunately, it's just that I made this remix on this laptop, so I have to show it to you guys on this. But it doesn't matter because I can show you guys everything anyway. So moving on, we've got the multiband compressor here from Fab Filter. It's really nice. Just experiment with going through the presets, guys. Whenever you're using a new plugin, go through the presets. Like, if someone tells you don't use presets, I would say they're an idiot, because you know what's wrong with using a preset? You know, go through the presets, find one you like, and then tweak it. You know, if it sounds good, it sounds good. So that's what I would say about that discussion topic. That's my personal opinion. I really don't think there's anything wrong with using presets. Although I would always tweak my sounds. So I'd always tweak my reverbs, my compressors, you know, my multipressors, which I'm using here. Using a multipressor on a tom fill is something which really adds a lot of depth to it. So this is without the multipressor. And this is with the multipressor. Just give it a sec. So basically what this is doing is it's taking out some of the highs, boosting some of the lows, and I'm actually automating that as well. So at the beginning, there's not much lows, and then towards the end of the drop, the lows come in. So that's something to bear in mind when you're making a build up to a track. You want to generally take the lows out, and then they need to come in hard on the drop. So that's why I kind of use that effect to kind of basically filter in the low frequencies, kind of like allowing those low frequencies in before the drop and kind of creating an epic tom fill sound. So I can see there's like a process, a discussion going on now at the moment. Moving on to the drop. A lot of people are going to be curious how I made the vocal chops and how I processed them and how I got them to sound the way that they do. That was something I promised I would go through with you guys. Someone says multipressor. Yeah, multipressor is it's a multiband compressor. So it's basically compressing different frequencies of the sound. On those toms, I had 2 multiband compressors on. I've got the Pro MB by FabFilter, and I've got just the standard Logic multipressor. So on the vocal chops here, I chopped them up in EXS24, which is just Logic's standard sampler. And basically what I did there was just cut up the vocal, short phrases that I found nice. And I'll take off all the processing here for you guys so you can see what it sounds like with and without. So this is without any processing. So yeah, it doesn't sound great, and it doesn't even sound very in time. But when you put all the processing on it, you know, it sounds cool. So the first thing I'm doing here is, I would say, just as a quick note, you know, when you're making vocal chops, you should, if you've got a MIDI keyboard or if you're just playing on your laptop or something, that's fine. But cut up the track, put it into a sampler, and then play it on your keyboard. And you can use this. This technique on anything. You can use it on guitars. You can use it on synths. You can use it on drums. You know, drum loops, for example. Cut it up into little phrases, and then put it into a sampler and play it on your keyboard and see what happens. And literally, like, this was just the first thing that happened. I thought that kind of sounded cool, and I just built on it a little bit, and it turned into that. So what I'm using to boost the pitch of the vocal chop is Little Altar Boy. I use it on a lot of things. You can change the format. Really great for vocal chops. If I put it down, you'd kind of get that devil voice. And you've also got a mix knob here, which is why you can still hear some of the original signal coming through. So I put that on 12, put the format on 12, and then I put a limiter on it. So that's what this is what it sounds like at the moment. And the point of the limiter is just to literally just squish the hell out of it and make sure that all those vocal chops are all the same volume. After that, I've put on RP Verb, which is a really nice epic reverb. So if you want like a huge reverb sound, really recommend RP Verb by Rob Papin. Sounds like this. And in this case, I've only put it on 2.6 seconds, so it's not that big. But you would see if I put the reverb on like 11, and just boost the space size, you can start to hear it coming up there. And yeah, basically the default on this is sounds really epic, and I really recommend it for getting those kind of big reverb sounds. So we've got a little bit of reverb on there, about 2 seconds. Room size is 500 meters, whatever that means. You know, making the room smaller is basically going to make the reverb sound smaller. A little bit of dry. Reverb's really important if you're making vocal chops, depending on the style of the vocal chops, but reverb's a key factor in that. So then I've got an EQ on there. It's cutting off some of the kind of annoying highs and cutting out a lot of the lows. Again, for those kind of like, well, those the people who are more starting off, you generally want to be like low cutting most of your sounds to get rid of the kind of mud and that kind of stuff. So let me know, guys, by the way, if you've got any further questions, anything you want to know, anything which you are, you know, still wondering about, let me know. So moving on, we've got a BC dynamic here, which is a wave shaping plugin, and that's basically squishing and distorting the sound, and it's a key part in getting the vocal chops to sound the way that they do. And by itself it sounds terrible, but when you play it in the context of the track, it sounds pretty cool. So that's the wave shaper there, and we've got Cla Vocals as well. Cla Vocals I really recommend for just for anything to do with vocals. This is with it. So as you can hear, it's compressing the hell out of the sound. There's a lot of compression going on here. We've got the wave shaper, we've got the compression from the Cla, and we've got the L2 as well. It's boosting some of the treble, boosting some of the bass. No reverb from that because we've already got reverb, and it's a crucial part of this sound that the reverb is going into the wave shaper, because if you put it after the wave shaper, you're not going to get that squished reverb sound, which is kind of a key part of the vocal chop. So we've also got some basically some Kickstart, some volume shaper on there, on 50%. That's just ducking it a little bit, and then we've got another EQ on there to boost some of the highs and kind of get back some of the stuff that I cut out earlier. It's also cutting out a lot of the lows, so that this is how it sounds in context. So yeah, guys, I'm glad you enjoyed the stream so far. I've showed you the vocal chops. I've showed you a little bit of the drum processing, and I've showed you like the sounds I've been using and that kind of stuff. I'm going to quickly break down the snare sound for you to see how I layered it, and then I'm going to show you the mastering channel. And after that, I think we're going to have to wrap it up and call it a day. If you guys do have any questions, like urgent questions you want answered, let me know and I'll see if I can real quick fit it in, but I think I've answered everything so far. That's right, High Life Admin just said we're going to do one-on-ones as well after this, so if you guys have any questions which you want to talk to me about personally, you can talk to me on the one-on-one after this. So I'm just going to show you the snare real quick. This is the main snare sound, which is just a sample with quite a lot of processing on it. So we've got loads of reverb on that, and the reverb here is going to a bus with some EQ on it. Just cutting out the lows. Always when you're sending reverb, you want to make sure that you are EQing it. It's very important. And a little trick which I used here, guys, is I've sent two reverbs. So I've got one reverb on the right, and I've got one reverb panned all the way to the left. It's not panned all the way actually, but what that does is it kind of separates the reverb. So you've got one kind of coming out this side and one on that side, one slightly louder than the other, and it creates a really nice kind of stereo depth to your sound. Instead of just having the reverb bang in the middle or just coming straight off the snare, I've sent it to two different buses. You've got one on the right, one on the left. It's a really useful kind of technique to kind of like just making your track, giving you that extra spice. It's something which I haven't seen a lot of producers do. So I've also got a sound shifter on here which is doing absolutely nothing. Probably experimented with using that and then didn't in the end. There's a vintage exciter on here. It's got like adding some highs. Also got some Shep's parallel particles on here. I recommend checking out the wave stuff. You know, there's some really fun stuff on there. Boosting the thick, just to kind of like make the snare sound a little bit thicker. You can add air, bite, sub. Definitely recommend checking that out. And then I've got the IRL reverb, which I was talking about earlier. So if you guys aren't using that room reverb, definitely go check that out. It's really useful. And I've got a reverse snare here leading into the snare, and then I've layered it with a click. And there's another click here, and then we've got a clap as well. Clap's not working because the battery is messed up. And then I've also got this kind of sound effect here, which I've added just like kind of it's basically an effect, and I've called it coins because I wasn't sure what else to call it. Kind of sounds like a bunch of like weird coins falling on the floor, but it's probably some kind of weird percussion thing, and that just adds this kind of like nice extra element to the snare, so it's not just a snare, you know. And I literally just use it once in the drop just to add that kind of little extra spice. So then we've got the kicks. As I said, I had the rehab kick, and I've got a more punchy kick and a more clicky kick. And in the kick bus, I've got sausage fastener, OTT, neutron. I've got this Transx multi thing by Waves, which adds some kind of like thud. And then I'm using the Imager, which we talked about earlier, basically putting the kick more in mono. So that's basically the drop. We've also got the pad and the bass. The pad is being sidechained with Kickstart with a volume shaper, like I explained before, and the bass is also being sidechained. You can see the kick pattern here. That's what's triggering basically the sidechain. So if we solo that, this is a very simple sound. And I've also got the drop bass here, which is also the same sound, just lower and processed a little bit differently, EQ'd differently, but it's being sent to the same bus. So that's pretty much it for the track, guys. Let me know if you've got any other questions. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up there. And if you guys do want to talk to me one-on-one, then we can do that after. So yeah, that's it. I'm gonna play the track one more time, and I'm just gonna, let's see, I'm just gonna play it off. Oh, that's what I forgot, the mastering chain. Let's go through that real quick. So what I've done is I've put on invisible limiter. Invisible limiter is catching the peaks, so it's not doing much. So in this case, it's doing a little bit. There's less than 5 dBs of reduction. So that's to catch the transients, and then after that, I've used the glue. And this is all basically this is what I learned from Jonas Aiden, whose tutorials are great, with a little bit of my own twist on it. So I've used the glue to compress it a little bit. And then we've got the Fab Filter multiband, that's mastering. So it's boosting some of the highs, compressing some of the lows, doing some crazy shit. Guys, if you just go through the presets, you will probably find something that makes your track sound better. So if it sounds better, stick it on. If it doesn't, don't use it. It's that simple. So then we've got the Ozone Imager, and I spoke about this earlier, so I won't go through that again, but yeah, we're basically just putting all the low frequencies in mono and the high frequencies on the sides. And then we've got a exciter here, doing very, very small amounts of exciting. The mixes is on less than 50%, and the amount is on like 1. Could I get some more water? Yes, thanks. So, and then I've got a vintage EQ here, just boosting some of the lows, just adding a bit of extra bass. Often happens, if your track doesn't have enough bass. And then after that, I used an EQ to kind of, I was referencing the track, and I noticed that these areas were a little bit too prominent, so I took them out a little bit, very small amount, like 2 decibels. And then when I was mastering the track, I used gain, and this gain plugin is being automated so that when the master hits, the gain plugin goes up, so the compression goes in a little bit harder, and the limiting is happening a little bit harder. So you basically automate the gain to go up when the drop hits, and back down again for the rest of the verses. And then finally, I've got another invisible limiter to really like crush the track. That's it. That's it, really. I would actually recommend using 16 times oversampling when you bounce it out on both of your limiters, and just putting the oversampling to max when you're bouncing out your track. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this session. I haven't seen any more questions that you wanted answered, so we've gone into 50 minutes of extra time. So I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I've tried to show you as much as I could given this time. Obviously there's a whole lot more to go into, and we haven't even touched the effects here, but unfortunately I think we're out of time now. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed it, and as I say, I'm going to be doing some one-on-ones after this, so if you guys do have any questions you want to talk to me one-on-one about, you can just click the enter one-on-one thing and talk to me on there. So once again, thank you for joining. I really hope you guys had a good time and learned a lot, and in the next webinar I'm going to be breaking down how I made my most recent remix, which I finished yesterday. So thanks again for joining, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.